asking that question?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So when you testified earlier, that Ms. Thomas had said she was not worried about law enforcement or an investigation, that's because that was actually in response to the question that you had asked her. Are you concerned about law enforcement or an investigation? And she said no.
I believe she said no, but when you asked about the detective calling and turning up the heat, I wasn't talking with Kelsie at that time. I was with Kelsie's husband at that time. So maybe I'm confusing the two incidents that you're asking about.
Regardless of what time it is, her response to you was that no, she was not concerned about any type of
Correct.
investigation. And that's because you asked the question, Ms. Thomas. She didn't elicit that on her own.
Correct.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may also be excused and leave the courtroom if you choose to do so.
There are areas on the back.
There was just some vomit by her face and in her hair on the bed, and then the child. Other than that, I don't believe anything else was on the bed.
Did you ask what the child's name was?
I asked her what the child's name was, yes.
And did you learn any information about what was, at that point, what was alleged to happen to the child?
That she was just found hanging in the closet.
After you observed the child on the bed, what did you do?
I started before, I moved, after checking for a pulse and if she was breathing, I believe I moved the patient to the floor where I felt the patient's extremities to see if they were cold or cool, which would be an indication whether to or whether to not start life-saving measures.
Now, when you first checked Chloe for her pulse and breathing, could you find a pulse?
There was no pulse and her airway was obstructed with vomit.
And at that time, could you tell whether or not she was breathing?
She was not breathing.
You indicated that then at that point you moved her to the floor.
I did.
Why did you move her to the floor?
For a more stable platform to perform CPR on a bed, the person's going to bounce as you do chest compression. The bed's going to take up some of those compressions. So I moved her to the floor to a more stable platform to be able to perform chest compressions.
And I think a moment ago that you said that you started to check her extremities.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
When we don't know how long the person or patient's been down, we check their extremities. That's kind of a sign on how long they've been without life or their heart hasn't been beating. The patient's extremities was cool to the touch. In my experience and training, that would mean that if it was an adult, me personally, I wouldn't have began life-saving measures due to the amount of time had surpassed that life-saving measures would have been viable.
When you say cool to the touch, and you specifically indicated the extremities, do you mean the legs and the arms?
Yes, the legs and the arms.
In your training and experience, what does it mean when you touch someone's legs or arms and they are cool to the touch?
It means that there hasn't been blood circulating through those extremities for an amount of time, basically the blood has had time to cool off. Since your extremities are exposed and and have air flowing around them, they're going to cool off faster than your torso where you have all your organs keeping the blood warm.
And so in your training and experience, do your extremities cool before your torso or the center part of your body?
They do.
And when you touched Chloe's legs and arms, were they in fact cool to the touch?
They were.
Did you also touch her torso?
I did.
And what did you observe?
Her torso was still warm to the touch.
Now, did you then perform life-saving measures?
I did. At that time, I began CPR. All this happens within a matter of a minute or seconds that all this happens.
I think a moment ago you said if it was an adult, would you still have performed life-saving measures?
Looking back on it, no, I wouldn't have.
Why not?
Just because I know the amount of time would have surpassed that any life-saving measures would have been unsuccessful.
Did you observe anything while you were, or prior to, when you say performing life-saving measures, what do you mean?
CPR.
And prior to performing CPR, did you do anything regarding Chloe's mouth?
I did. I moved her head off to the side to clear the vomit from her airway before I started chest compressions.
And prior to putting Chloe on the floor, you didn't notice any vomit on the floor?
No, there was not.
What if when those items, did they actually come out of Chloe's mouth then when she was on the floor?
Yes.
And did you make any observations of it?
I did. It was in a ravioli, spaghetti-o type substance. For me, having small kids, that's what we feed them. So,
And when you say performing CPR, can you just briefly explain what you mean by that to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
so CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Basically, you've probably all seen it. It was chest compressions is what I was doing while I was waiting my crew of firefighters to come from Station 2. So I began chest compressions after I quickly cleared her airway. So I was pushing on her chest for probably a minute or two before the other firefighters got there.
Now, while you were performing CPR on Chloe, did you make any observations around her neck?
I did. I noticed ligature marks around her neck, or what I believe to be ligature marks.
At that point, and I know this is very quickly, did you at that point notice any additional injuries?
I did not.
How long did it take for paramedics to arrive?
I would say less than 5 minutes. The other firefighters that arrived brought in the AED that we applied to Chloe, and they suctioned her airway and began giving her rescue breaths with a bag valve mask, basically a manual bag that we ventilate the patient with.
And you said they brought in an AED?
An AED, yes.
What's that?
Automated external defibrillator. It's something that shocks, basically what you see, that it would shock the heart rate.
Did the paramedics initially that were to work on Chloe, they're on the floor?
The paramedics that arrived in the ambulance stayed in the ambulance. When the police officers let me know that the ambulance was there, I picked up Chloe and we carried Chloe and the AED to the ambulance where we could begin working on her in the ambulance.
And then at some point did the paramedics or the ambulance drive Chloe to the hospital?
They did.
Did anyone else arrive, or who else arrived when you were outside, if you recall?
There was a male subject that arrived, opened the back of the ambulance, and seemed to be very upset. I don't know who that was. I can't assume who it was.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross? Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. Chief Deputy Binge, how long have you worked for the Tupelo Fire Department?
Since April 1st, 2003, so going on 17 years.
Okay. And would it be safe to assume that this particular call that you responded to was not the first time that you've responded to an emergency call for medical service?
No, it's quite often.
Okay. Not the first time that you've responded to a 911 call similar to this and found somebody deceased?
No, happens quite often.
Okay. When you observed Kelsie Thomas at her home that day, your report notes that she appeared frantic to you?
She did. She appeared to me to be upset.
And all of that, you and I had a discussion in your deposition, was all consistent with what you would have expected under the circumstances, a mom calling 911, frantically concerned about the safety of her daughter.
Objection, Judge, is to refer to deposition. The appropriate way is for counsel to ask the question today, and then if he needs to ask about the deposition, he can.
Sustained? You may rephrase.
Deputy Chief Bench, I had asked you a question about the female appearing frantic, correct?
Correct.
And that was your observation of her?
Yeah, she was acting frantic, yes.
And was there anything about Kelsie Thomas's demeanor as you observed her that would seem out of sorts or out of the ordinary for the type of situation you were responding to?
That it was not.
Now, in this case, you also offered a pre-hospital care report. Would that be consistent with your normal duties in responding to a situation like this?
Yeah, if I'm involved in the call and do something before the firefighters get there, I will author that section of the report to explain what I did before the other firefighters got there.
Okay. And earlier in your testimony, you were discussing how when you observed Cloe Chandler, her extremities were cool to the touch, but her torso was warm. Is that correct?
That is correct.
1 correct? In your report, you note that you observed Cloe Chandler, her extremities were cool to the touch, but her torso was warm. Is that correct? That is correct. In your report, you note that when you observed Cloe Chandler, her extremities were cool to the touch, but her torso was warm. Is that correct? That is correct. the patient's skin was blue and her color began to become more pink as CPR continued. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
Is that not an indication of some life still being in her?
What that indication was that our CPR was perfusing blood and moving that blood throughout her body. So I mean, that meant the CPR that we were doing was quality CPR, and we, by us pressing on her chest and doing the CPR, we were moving the blood throughout her body.
Okay. And that CPR again was life-saving measures that were taken upon Chloe, and all of that would have happened obviously before she went to the hospital and before she was pronounced deceased, correct?
That's correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Nothing based on that, Your Honor.
You may step down. May this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may also excuse and leave the courtroom if you choose to do so. Statement from this witness.
We approached her.
Members of the jury, I've just been informed that we've run out of witnesses for this morning, but there certainly are many more witnesses in this room.